Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
So, question for you. What is your value? We all have a value. Everything in life has a value to it. We're going to talk about that connected to interior design, but in general. I don't know what happens whenever we get with her. She's an amazing designer. We go down the life rabbit hole. And it starts with design, but then it goes a little bit deeper than that. But she goes a little bit deeper than that. And that's why she does such a great job in terms of putting designs together, what is going to truly support you and all of that. I value our friendship, and she's KN. She's back here. I just call her K. Is it okay to call you KN?
Yeah, most people do.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Last name Colasacco?
Colasacco.
Colasacco. Yep. So the value thing, what are your thoughts overall on that?
Well, there's so many layers to the word value, right? It comes down to you as a person, you as a business, whatever service that you offer, and then also what you're placing value in your life. And in the design world, like, what are you spending your money on? What is the highest value that you should be investing in? For me, I've really been doing a lot of like inner work and inner digging, and I just can't help but think about this one question that keeps popping up in my head when I'm driving to a job site or a new meeting with a new client, or just like driving in general. And it's basically, the question is, have you cracked your moral compass for something or someone or an opportunity that you thought would bring greater value to your life, and it just ended up being gold-plated and not at all what it seemed?
In other words, we sometimes compromise our compass because we see value in something, but when you peel back the layers, the value really wasn't there.
Right. Because you're kind of blinded with hopefulness, I think, of the outcome of something, or like the quality of something, and then it ends up being like one of your biggest lessons.
Do you do this in basically any situation? Do you already look to the future of what it's going to be like? Let's say meeting somebody for the first time. Could be personal, could be professional. You have an appointment with a client, never met him before, but you got some information. You're not just going to show up there blind. You already have, some things. And I'm going hypothetical for everybody here, but you already know the way it's going to go. And I don't mean to jinx it, but I do that. I visualize it in advance so that I can put some value on it or take away value that it doesn't deserve. And many times it's right on the money, no pun intended. It's like I'll show up and it's like, yeah, this is what I thought it was going to be. I don't want to manifest it. It's just like, that's what I thought it was going to be. Yeah. All right. So, if it's a job, you put a certain value on it. If it's a personal situation, you put a certain value on it. But you want to make sure your value is correct and also align with your moral compass, right?
Well, yeah, because I think that your morals play a huge role in how you show up to your job and to your clients, and how you can resolve any potential issues that may come up or not. I mean, if you don't have to, I think your moral compass is basically how you're navigating life. Like, do you find that you have to kind of go against it a little bit because you thought that something was going to turn out way different, like you said, than it actually did? For me, like early on in my career, I really, I'm embarrassed to say that I have taken jobs that I absolutely should have said no to because my morals were like, I completely ignored what I stand for just for the sake of signing a particular project to get it on my list of things that I've done, kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I actually ended up walking away from one or two of those projects, and it ended horribly. But it's a lesson now where I'm like, I'm not gonna devalue what I provide as a designer for anyone or anything.
Did you know, even in that situation early in your career, did you know going into it that it's probably not going to be good? It's probably not going to be worth it. Or you kind of saw what it was about, but you still went with it.
Yeah, I mean, I did for sure. I had my blinkers on in my head and I
Mhm.
was like, this is probably not going to be good, but here we go. Giddy up.
Yep.
Let's do it. But at the same time, I was so desperate to learn and get as much experience under my belt that I was just like, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to figure it out like I
Mhm.
always do.
Sure.
Maybe it's worth the stress. Maybe it's not, but maybe it'll be a good story one day.
And we're not just talking about design and your business in general here. This is universal. This is a universal
Yeah,
thing. So
totally universal.
I met with a new client yesterday, and we kind of had the same conversation in terms of him looking for leads and the type of people that he's looking to work with. And there are some where just we're talking about where it's I don't know if that's going to be worth it. And then we came up with the pain and suffering fee. You raise your rate just because you know what it's probably going to be, but you don't want to walk away from it. So it's the pain and suffering surcharge that the client doesn't know about.
I call it Botox tax personally.
Okay, all right, love that. Yeah.
I've even told clients, I'm like, listen, this project or, like friends or whatever the situation, I'm like, this is going to cause me stress and I'm going to have to pay for it somehow.
Mm.
So
Yeah, well, it makes it worth it, what you're up against. And it could even just be the personality of the person that you're dealing with, that's
yeah,
but it comes back to one thing, your value. Where do you put your value even in those situations? You might be swallowing your pride or your moral compass there to take on a job. Not suggesting you do that, but sometimes we need to, and it becomes true work at that point.
I think also we got to shine a light on, are we taking other people's value away? Are we doing to people what have been done to us? For example, you go out to a nice restaurant and it's expensive. And you're like, do I really want to pay for this very expensive meal? Is it worth, like, the chef could be a Michelin chef kind of thing? They have that value. They know what they're worth. Of course, the menu is going to be all kinds of fancy and crazy and weird and expensive. But you could walk in there and you don't even know. You just like picked a restaurant. You're like, oh, do I really want to pay for this? You don't even look at the bill. You're just like, I'm just going to get whatever, like a cheeseburger, whatever it is, shrimp. And it's like exceeds what you expected that you'd be paying for that meal. And you're like, why am I paying for this? And then you have to stop and think, like, who's the person behind the craft?
I walked into a restaurant last week and I walked out.
Did you really?
Yeah, it's a new restaurant in town, and the goal with the person I was with, we are just going to go to a local sports bar and have some apps and a couple of drinks. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't get it. I always wanted to go to this place. And I walk in. Usually need a reservation, but here's the thing. It's not a fancy place, but they're trying to kind of make it look that way a little bit. It's in a nautical town. I don't eat seafood. I'll do like fried calamari. That's about it.
And
I
that,
had
that counts. That's
had a
something.
bad experience back in the day. And I sit down, I'm like, all right, well, let's do dinner here. I'm looking at the menu and there's only like 4 steaks on there, and the steaks are like insanely expensive. I'm like, I just had a big steak like 2 days ago, so I don't want to overdo, the steak thing. Maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. And I'm like to the other person, I'm like, are you good? Like this is not what I was thinking. And I actually left. But here's the thing. I didn't put value on that place. Even if I wanted the steak, I'll go to a steak restaurant
Right.
instead of paying what they had. And by the way, I don't know what they're confused. Like there's an identity crisis going on here with this place, because you got like the $80 tomahawk steak, right? And then you look up, and then where the bathrooms are, there's a sign over. It says with an arrow, poop deck.
What? So
Doesn't
it's
go
like
for
a
me.
casual, like aesthetic, super casual, but the menu is like a
Right.
Michelin menu.
Yeah. Like what are you trying to do? What's going on? I guess this goes back to design, just
Yeah.
what fits, what works. And who I
Yeah.
was with, I said, I'm not getting it. She goes, well, the chairs by the bar were had a certain fabric on them and a color. So it kind of looked, a little upscale. I go, but not good enough. It's like I'm good going there, just getting some apps and burger and thing like that, because that's what it looks like to me.
Something
But
more casual.
right. Poop
Right.
deck? No, no, not, like not the,
That was a design fail on their part,
I
for
agree.
sure.
I agree. And it was interesting, the floor, the way they painted it, because it's a nautical theme, it almost looked like water in a way. So it was a little
You know
interesting.
what? It's epoxy.
It's epoxy, right?
Yeah.
And it has like swirls in it, so it could look like water. You really want to do it, I'll put water underneath there, put plexiglass on top, and put some fish, whatever. But that's me.
So you know what
Um,
happened there is that whoever was contracted to design that place, and it might have just been the owner, honestly, they might have just been like, I want a really cool nautical place that is appealing to that vibe, but like I want to offer some crazy expensive menu that doesn't fit the vibe of the place. And that's like the value of having the right people contracted to help you get started. Like
yes.
the right designer or the right contractor or architect will literally say to you, you're not making sense because you're not aligned at all with what you're putting out there and what you're providing. Um, I have all my clients that are commercial clients. They all opened up their first business. They needed a lot of guidance that I was happy to give them. I had to learn what their brand was going to be, and they weren't even sure yet what that
Mm,
was going to be. So they were kind of having like a little bit of the identity crisis too. I have another client right now doing the same thing, and we're kind of like finessing what that final brand is going to be. So there is branding involved with design work. Some designers, they don't want to be involved in that. They're like, figure it out and come to me when you're ready. But me, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to leave you high and dry, because at the end of the day, someone like you is going to walk in there thinking they're going to have one experience and walk out with a different one. And they're going to be like, what the heck is going on there? That makes
hmm.
no sense.
Totally. It's all part of it. You just brought back a memory too. I did marketing for a small amusement park. Very small, but cute family kind of place, been around for years. And the owners decided to build, upgrade the building and bring in a restaurant consultant and started. So I'm not even kidding. Serving tomahawk steaks, gourmet mac and cheese. The kitchen was amazing, right next to the arcade games. Like, go figure. No, you have go-karts and batting cages, and you're serving tomahawk steaks. Like, what were you guys thinking? And they were thinking, well, we could probably pull some people from the Hamptons because we're about 40 minutes away. And I'm thinking, ain't nobody traveling from the Hamptons. This is Long Island.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like to go there. And they
No.
abandoned that. I mean, again, they spent like 1.2 million on the building, and they abandoned the idea. And this year, the place officially closed, gone.
It's
Um,
like a high-end Dave and Buster's, it sounds
yeah,
like.
but Dave and Buster's is much more luxurious than what we have here. Like, at least in terms of the attraction, it was nice. It was nice, but again, confusion, and I guess it goes back to value. I'm going there. I'm not getting value in my tomahawk steak. Looking at the ice cream dispenser and again the arcade, the claw. It's not. It's there's a disconnect going on there. How do we find our value? Let's say if it's us, how do you know what your value is?
I think you have to really sit with yourself for a minute and just think, what am I providing? What am I bringing to the table? And what differentiates me from my competition or the same person doing the same thing as me? Who am I as a person is what it comes down to. It has nothing to do with your job. It's just strictly who you are as an individual. Like, what is your moral compass? What are your beliefs? What are your 5 core values? And are you staying true to your word? That's what your value is.
Hmm.
Like, I have been struggling myself since being back from Italy because I'm on 2 different time zones, but I'm also like, I want to implement change into this new person I'm evolving in. Every year as we grow, we evolve, and you kind of have to fit a new pair of shoes in a sense. And if you're saying you're going to do something and start practicing all these changes and you're not doing it, it makes you question your value.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've kind of been dealing with a little bit personally. And it makes you kind of really focus and reset as many times as you need to get to that next mountain, to get over that mountain to the next thing, basically.
Do you find it interesting once you start thinking of your value and, like you're saying, going within and just looking at all this stuff, then once you kind of identify what your value is, who you are, the value you put on yourself, then you look at your relationships and you kind of pair it all up. And does it fit with this? Doesn't really, I'm not going to invest time in this, let's say, person. I just, no, that doesn't align now with my value. It's not like we're being snooty, conceited, having an ego. It's just like you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, and I'm not my value. I value my time. I don't want to spend time with this person. They're not what I thought they were. And you change, I changed. Not doesn't work.
See, I think you have to kind of see a little bit into the future when it comes down to people and investing time. And if it's something where like you really have to put in the work to kind of elevate them and they're not at the same level that you're currently at mentally, like emotionally, and maybe just in their jobs, like if they're just not quite where they want to be in life yet, even a little bit, you're just going to have to completely continue to motivate those people and almost like parent them. I hate to say it, but it's true. And then you're not going to enjoy the process and you can't enjoy that end result. So whatever your end results and your goal in life is, if you want to travel the world with somebody and that be your best friend, but they're somebody who hates to travel, or like they're just very comfortable in their hometown and their zip code and they're never going to leave, that'll never work. You're never going to convince them to change. So you have to really kind of look a little bit into the future, not too much, to start making better decisions that do line up with your value.
Do you need to know what your goals are before you put a value on it? I was just thinking as we're talking, we talked about goals. Like, do you need to know what's your goal? Like as you grow as a person, your goal is to succeed, to feel good about what you're doing, to prosper in that way, to have the right kind of relationships with the right kind of people. I think you need to have the goals first, right?
You do. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves with goals though. So I personally, I like to do small goals that are very attainable. So
Sure.
if you can reach smaller goals, you can check that off your list, say, okay, I did that. Now I want more. And you can build it up little by little, like bricks. But you do need some kind of a goal because you need the motivation. You have to self-motivate. No one's going to do it for you. You can watch TikTok and YouTube and all these things, and you can watch, like what's his name? Tony
Robbins,
Robbins,
right.
and they can motivate you for all of 5 minutes. But at the end of the day, if you're not motivating yourself to get out of bed, do the workout, eat cleaner, start writing that book you want to write, whatever it is in your life you want to do, if you're not doing small steps and forcing yourself to do that, nobody's going to do it for you. And then you're never going to reach that goal at all, not even a little bit.
Let's look at the word value when it comes to working with a designer like yourself. When you find or you make the suggestion to a client, hey, you could do this or you could do this. How do you decide? You decide, and also the client, in terms of the value. Is this worth it to me? Do I want to spend more on a higher end fabric? Do I want to? How do you decide?
Well, so just today, actually, I was educating my client on the difference between solid wood custom shelves versus shelves that you can buy online prefabricated, for that floating shelf. And, we have a very specific vision. And I always, for situations like this, when it comes to design and materials and fixtures, you have to let them know, educate them on the pros and the cons. If you spend a little more here, this is what you're getting. If you spend a little bit less, this is what you're risking. So for example, like quartz, Home Depot sells quartz. No offense to Home Depot, by the way. I'm not trying to get sued by Home Depot, but Home Depot has quartz, and then there are stone yards that have quartz from brands like Caesar Stone and Cambria, who are legitimate brands that have high quality. And the quality is because it's man-made a specific way, whereas the less expensive quartz that Home Depot offers, they're not made the same way. They're not made with the same ingredients and the same finishes. So if you put a 400-degree pot on a Home Depot quartz, that's going to buckle after like 2 or 3 times. You go with Cambria or Caesar Stone, you're not really going to run into that issue. So you're going to pay a little more for a long-term product. And that's where you have to kind of figure out what you want to spend your money on, and if you want to deal with this headache a year from now.
It's so true. The last house I was in, they did it in HD. Everything was in HD. You know what that is? Home Depot.
Home Depot, yeah.
And
or Home Depot.
Yeah, and there's some stuff that works, but then the floor, and I don't know the material, but it's a stone and it's a very porous stone. It almost looks, it was white, but it almost had in some areas like a little lava look to it.
Yeah.
Bad idea. You drop a pot or something and right away puts a hole in it, cracks it. I don't know what they were thinking, but you get what you pay for. And
right.
They remodeled the kitchen after a small fire, but most of it was Home Depot. Same thing with the bathrooms. Some of it was okay, but again, like the floor situation and even the countertop, there was some challenges with that. But you gotta look long term and not cheap out. And it has nothing to do with you benefiting on the back end. It's you making the recommendation of what's going to last and what's really not going to last.
Well, because at the end of the day, I've had clients and people reach out and call me a year later and say, hey, this shower glass is getting like stains on it. And I'm like, well, it's from Wayfair. What do you expect? I told you what was going to happen, and you went against my word and my recommendation, and now you're stuck with this headache. And I said, and it's a year later, they're not going to replace it. I'm sorry. Things like this is stuff that I deal with. I know a lot of designers deal with, builders deal with it, people in the industry deal with it. I mean, that's anything that you devalue, it's gonna bite you in the ass eventually.
I would pay anything extra not to have that problem on the shower door. Really?
Me too. Anything, honestly. Like I will say I spend more money on things I know are good quality in life, food, materials, anything. If I know that I'm not going to be aggravated in the end as a result because I didn't pay what I needed to for it.
Sure. Yeah. 100%. And I've stopped looking at my shower door because I just pretend it's not there. But when it comes time to cleaning, and when it gets to that point, then it's like have the cleaning person come in because I don't want to deal with it. But I didn't know that they made something that repels water, so you'd never have to deal with that. Worth every penny. Worth every penny.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It looks nasty.
Well, we'll get you a new one. Don't worry. I have people for that.
I got people. I got
a guy.
So I'm usually the guy that says I got a guy. I don't have that guy. You offer a lot of value in what you do for your clients. How do we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at K_ANN Creations and Design. You can find me on TikTok. My website is KNCreationsandDesignLTD.com. And I'm actually going to start putting out more blogs and more educational information on value to kind of introduce people to other ways of looking at what they're investing their money in for their projects.
I think that's a great idea. And even when we're talking, I mean, joking about the shower door, I didn't know if you told me this and this, I would have went for the more expensive one. I don't know the difference. Same thing with the floor. I inherited the floor, but if I would have known, I wouldn't buy that. It's even looking at it. I'm not the expert looking at it before it got cracked. It doesn't look like it's going to last. But we don't know until we know, and by that time, it's usually too late.
All that gold plated. Don't fall for it.
Yeah. Same thing with relationships too, but that's a whole other podcast. Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.